Blessings, beloveds. Welcome back, Anastasia, Cosmic Astrologer. Let's talk about Mars in Leo, the fire sign, a fixed sign, heart energy. It goes straight to the heart, this energy. So it's actually quite a beautiful, radiating, warmth, warm giving, heart centered energy where we can use the Mars from the point of view of our willpower, because Mars is our willpower, of course, and we must also bring into it Pluto, because Pluto is the higher will, and Mars is a bit like the servant of Pluto. So Mars is that energy that basically helps us get out of bed every day, for instance, as does the sun for that matter. So it's the essential drive, willpower, desire, nature that actually gives us the strength and energy and power and courage, Leo, courage, to act on the things that we need to act on. We need courage in this life. We really need courage. We face a lot of different situations in our life. We face adversity, we face crisis, we face challenges. And so Mars is that planetary body that helps us stand up for ourselves, protect others if we need to, be competitive if we need to, be combative if we need to, express our own desire and will. Now, of course, that can be totally exaggerated or misdirected at times, because Mars is the planet of many things, but it is the planet of anger and war, fighting, conflict, and so forth. So we need to I think it's important to work with the Mars Leo energy with our creative sort of purpose, if you like, our creative energy, our creative juice. It's kind of putting the fuel in the tank with the pure solar soul, sun, soul, fire energy into it. So it's giving us that courage. Courage comes from the heart center, Leo, the lion. Think about the Leo in myth, in all the various different myths that correspond to Leo. It's the archetype of the hero, right? And so, from a really authentic, centered level, that energy can be incredibly beautiful in terms of what it can create from that heart center. The thing that we always need to keep in mind is that it has a polarity point, which is Aquarius. Aquarius is a polarity point. And of course, most of us are aware that this transit of Mars, it's going to make quite a few aspects along the way in his journey. First of all, let me just back up. So the ingress of Mars into Leo started on the 11th of June, which will be today for you guys. It's the 12th for me, where I am. Mars has been traveling in Cancer for quite some time. Now, in traditional astrology, Mars is in its fall in that sign, so it is said to not do very well in that particular sign. And I do believe that the whole model of dignities and abilities is actually very valuable, and it does show us a lot about how planets can perhaps struggle, and perhaps where they'll be greatly challenged and work outside of the status quo as well. That's another meaning to planets in detrimental fall can simply just operate outside of the establishment, outside of the status quo. So they always walk the drum to their own beat, or walk the beat to their own drum, however you say it. So it is an individual who's not going to conform. Okay, so there's that level as well. But Mars in Cancer does struggle a bit. It's a very emotional Mars. It is fueled by the emotion of Cancer, the sensitivity of Cancer, the protectiveness of Cancer, and it can sort of displace emotional anger in ways that are not necessarily appropriate at times. Anyway, we are through that now, and it did have the opposition to Pluto, which I think was quite testing and challenging for a lot of people. A lot of people sent me messages and emails kind of saying, that was a pretty difficult sort of transit, and I'm not surprised. It's the planets of will opposing each other, as it were, in a polarized way, of course. So that would have brought in the aspect within us that some of us may have been struggling with our own personal will and the integration of the higher will. Now, as Mars moves into Leo, it's a quite a different picture. Mars is a masculine planet. It's fiery, it's hot, it produces heat. And of course, so does Leo. Leo is a fire sign, it's a fixed sign, it's ruled by the sun. It's quite a regal type of energy or presence. It holds that energy of royalty or the king, the ruler, that feeling of being special, of being courageous, of taking pride in one's work, one's energy, one's creative pursuits, and so forth. And of course, first of all, what you need to go back to is, well, where is transiting Mars in your chart at the moment? It is that area of life that's going to be energized. That's probably one of the best words you can use for Mars. It's that area of life will just be totally energized. And of course, through the lion, which is the heart center, it gives us that opportunity to really connect with our heart's purpose, our heart's energy, our generosity. Leo is a very generous sign. It's very playful. It's very creative. It can be very demanding. It can be very self-centered and very self-absorbed as well. It just depends on who whose chart we're looking at. For example, who is the individual that we are perhaps looking at when we are talking about Mars in Leo. So for each of us, it's going to have those basic sort of foundations of what Mars in Leo corresponds to, but how we activate, integrate, and actualize that energy is entirely up to us, right? So the opposition to Saturn is going to be quite a tricky few days there, and it is pulling in Uranus as well. So it's going to be forming a T-square. It's going to have a conjunction to Venus later in the month, and it's also going to form a Yod later in the month as well. So I just want to bring up the chart and just bring a real clock chart up onto the screen for us to have some visuals, which always helps, right? So here it is here, Mars' ingress into Leo. It's at 0 degrees 22 minutes. So it happened, quite a few hours ago, 11th of June. And it's going to be into the sign of Leo until pretty much the end of July, so around the 29th, 30th of July. So we're looking at about, almost a month and a half of Mars in Leo. It's a substantial time, really. It's about 6 weeks of giving us that light, that fire, that passion, that creative urge, that creative energy, the creative spark, the courage, right, to pour our energy into that particular area of life. So it obviously is going to depend on which house it falls in the chart for you, because whatever Mars in Leo represents, the house that it's transiting in, that's where it's going to speak. That's where it's going to pour its energy into, right? So it's always important to think about which house it's actually transiting through. And it may be overlapping and actually transiting a couple of houses, especially if you're not using whole sign houses and you are using another house system where you may have signs, overlapping. So you have two signs, part of two signs in one house and so forth. These are things that you need to think about. So as we progress forward, actually, before I do, just a few more key words about Mars in Leo. So as we said, it's the Mars is your desires and willpower, pure and simple. It is acting as a companion to Pluto. And the alignment of Pluto and Mars is a very important alignment because it's speaking to the lower will and the higher will. And, an example of that, discord for some might be that there can be a sense of struggle because you're wanting to do what you want to do, right? You're wanting to act the way you want to act. You want to get what you want to get. And that's fine. We all have those feelings and those desires in our life. But if we are not, if we're not pulling in the Pluto energy, which is the soul, the alignment of the soul, then there's always going to be an experience of discord or conflict or battle of wills and things like that, because there's this sense of I'm just wanting to do what I want to do and screw everybody else kind of thing. It can be a very selfish sort of energy. Um, Mars in Leo is it's the hero, it's the warrior, it's the actor. It's very dramatic. It's a very dramatic energy. It's very impressive. It's very magnetic. It's very what's the word I'm thinking? Charismatic sort of energy. It can really impress, upon others through its sheer willpower and desire to be somebody, to be special, to light up on that stage, as it were, to light up in your own stage, in your own stage in life. That is, your creative energies, your creative pursuits, what you are trying to actualize in your life. This is a great time with Mars in Leo to give you that sense of confidence and courage to either pursue or step into, some projects that maybe you've haven't had the confidence to undertake. As I said, it can be a little bit self-centered at times as well, and part of the issue with that is that when Leo is standing alone and it's expressing its beautiful radiant energy at a very high authentic level, that can be very encouraging and very warm, and very creative and impressive. But if it doesn't integrate the Aquarius component, it lacks the awareness of what other people have to show. You know, the Aquarian polarity brings into our consciousness the understanding and the awareness that I'm not the only one with the special gifts and talents here. I need to actually be aware of everybody else's talents and gifts and give some acknowledgement to that as well, not just want to sort of take over, center stage and be the one, as it were. That's very Leo, right? To kind of step into that space. And at times that may be appropriate if you're an actor in a movie, right? And the role is such that you need to be that center sort of theme, piece, or storyline, etc. But we're talking about real life here, I suppose. Real. We're talking about our own life, right, individually. So it is always important to bring in some awareness of the polarity. And Saturn is going to do that whether we like it or not, because Mars is going to form this opposition to Saturn. So let's just animate the chart and take it forward. So basically for the rest of June, Mars is going to be, slowly moving through the first sort of 10 degrees of Leo. And then towards the end of the month, pretty much around the 30th of June or the 1st of July, you can see that Mars now has ingressed into 12 degrees of Leo. And so it's forming an opposition to Saturn. Okay, so I just want to, sorry about my crooked line, but I just want to point to you, there's Saturn down there and there is Mars, and they are in an exact opposition. So I want to make a few comments about that, and then I want to bring in the fact that these two are actually in a T-square with Uranus. So first of all, Mars-Saturn aspects are, in my opinion and through my observations and experience, are an incredibly challenging combination of planets, because Mars is your own personal will and how you want to exercise your will, how you want to take charge of things, what action you wish to take upon matters, creative projects, issues, conflicts. It could be anything, depends where that Mars transit is happening in your chart. And an opposition is always two polarized energies, right? So the initial sense of this kind of energy in terms of two planets being opposite each other is always one one person will take one side and the other person will be taking the other. It's a polarized force, right? So naturally for us, for each of us, we are going to hold the position of Mars, and we will project that Saturn outside of us, right? That's just what an opposition creates, initially at least. And so, because Mars is, as I said, your own sort of desires and what you wish to act on, what you wish to do, and Saturn is the establishment, it is the rules, the norms, the regulations, the limitations that will be imposed upon us. Now, that may also obviously act out as a collective experience, of course, because this is a collective transit. But when we are looking at it in our own life, we need to look at it relative to where those two planets are in our birth chart, right? So immediately there's this sense of push, pull, push, pull. Okay, that's Mars is pushing and Saturn is basically laying down the law and saying, well, no, you can't do that. You should do this instead, or you should do it that way instead, or these are the rules, these are the limitations, these are the laws around that. So you can't just run off and exercise your own total free will as much as you will want to, as it were. And of course, Saturn is in Aquarius, so it brings in that polarity of Leo Aquarius energy, which is very much again about my own self, my own willpower, and my own sort of specialness and how I want to be seen and what I wish to create out of this situation, versus Saturn, the establishment, but also the group and society and communities, which is Aquarius. So there's going to be some necessary awareness brought into this particular energy on these few days where it's active, where if we are experiencing what appears to be as somebody or something or circumstances, or depending on the country we live in, depending on what's going on in our life, it'll be some force that appears to be opposing what we wish to act upon. And if we are not aware of this, then it really comes up as a very severe, intense sense of conflict and frustration, right? That somebody's just literally put a roadblock in front of us and we can't move forward in the direction that we want to. And so the awareness around that needs to be, okay, well, if this is the apparent block that's before me, how do I need to navigate my way through this in a way that's going to be more productive, as opposed to conflicting and just more frustrating for myself. So these are the sorts of thoughts that we'll need to bring into this energy, and also the recognition of my will, my desires, Mars in Leo, versus the establishment or society or a particular community or group of people, and what those needs are around that particular community or group or society, and what's standing in the way of myself, and in being sort of interfaced, if you like, with that external reality, right? It's a very challenging transit, actually, and if you have it in as a natal aspect in your chart, it's a theme that you experience your entire life, right? And it obviously changes in form and experience based on life experience. But I just want to read you. Here's some comments about a Mars Saturn combination, right? So inhibited actions, inhibited anger, frustration, disciplined or concentrated energies. Now, so whilst it's got some really not so pleasant signatures about it, it does also have the potential for really disciplined and concentrated energy, which is energy is Mars, and the discipline is going to come through the Saturn, right? So it can act in a very productive way, provided you actually integrate the opposition into yourself and not project the Saturn out there. The minute we project the Saturn out there, it just becomes this experience of someone is stopping me, or I'm being blocked, or I'm being shut down, or I'm being limited at this present moment with what I'm trying to accomplish and achieve. And, Leo is a very passionate sign. It's very fiery. It's very dramatic. It's not going to take things laying down. Mars in Cancer would kind of go about it in very different ways. It's a water sign. Water signs are not upfront about their actions. Mars in Leo is very forthright, very upfront, and very it's I wear my heart on my sleeve kind of thing. This is what I stand for. This is what I'm passionate about. So don't get in my way kind of thing. And whilst that can be admirable in certain situations, in a certain context and situation, it can also prove to be very difficult when Saturn's standing in the way, because we have to integrate the Saturn into this. There's no way around it, right? And by not integrating the Saturn, all we're going to experience is that sense of anger, which will be somewhat internalized, suppressed, a sense of feeling limited and frustrated, right? So it's really important to recognize the energy of Saturn in Aquarius here. Energy focused on narrow objectives, that just follows through with the comment of disciplined and concentrated energies. The ability to perform painstaking work. In charts of both sexes, often associated with difficult father relationships. In women's charts, often signifies difficulties with males in general. That's just a comment relative to a person's natal birth chart that may have a Saturn-Mars combination. Now, I want to read you Mars-Uranus combination, because Mars is also squaring Uranus. Okay, so we don't just have Mars opposite Saturn. Uranus is in the picture here, and Uranus is a little bit like a pressure cooker, okay, in this planetary configuration. So what you have is Uranus over here in Taurus, and it's basically forming a square to Mars, okay, and a square to Saturn. We know that there's a Saturn square Uranus this year 3 times, okay, and we're just right in the heart of the second square at the moment. And so whilst Saturn and Uranus have been creating this dance, which has been incredibly conflicting and has created extreme turmoil in the nature of reality because of the events taking place. And it is very much about freedom, liberation, sovereignty, truth versus the establishment and the sense of control that everyone is experiencing in varying degrees depending on where you are. It's the battle of the establishment versus being free and liberated, right? Uranus. And so whilst these two are dancing together all year in a conflicting, challenging aspect, which ultimately brings about change, by the way, but the change comes through cataclysmic crisis type of events, obviously, And then we have Mars, who, has recently or just ingressed into Leo, but by the 1st of July. So we've still got, a couple of weeks left before this aspect kicks in. Mars joins up, to make the opposition to Saturn, and at the same time forms a square to Uranus. So we're not just looking at Mars Saturn alone, right? So all the things that I mentioned about Mars Saturn, yes, they are in play, and those are the signatures of that particular opposition. But Uranus is literally holding the energy of these two planets being opposite each other. And Uranus is actually going to be the outlet. And Uranus is not an easy energy, and it's not of the establishment. And it is an energy that describes rebellious behavior, unpredictable, recklessness type of behavior. It's also the individual that has really high aspirations and ideals. And this is actually called an apex Uranus. So when you have a T-square, which usually involves at least three planets, in this case it's three of them, Mars opposite Saturn, and then Uranus square Mars and square Saturn, this is called a T-square pattern. T-squares are an incredibly powerful planetary configuration, and they speak very loudly when they are formed in the birth chart or when they are just forming as transits, collectively. So there's this, I think there's going to be this incredible sense of Mars in Leo wanting to wanting to shine and step forth with its own sort of desires, feeling the control by Saturn, and then Uranus comes in and basically it amplifies the Mars in Leo, it energizes it, and it's basically conflicting with Saturn. So it's a very powerful configuration. And as I said, the energy has to ultimately come through Uranus. So to stabilize an apex Uranus energy in a T square is not easy. There's Uranus corresponds to electrical, sort of the electrical circuitry systems in the body. So it creates this very intense sort of electrical nervousness, restlessness type of energy within us, right? And so the Uranus is going to be wanting to break away from that Saturn. The Mars in Leo is definitely going to be wanting to do his own thing as well. And the Saturn is going to be standing his ground as well. And so the trick with this kind of planetary energy is to somehow integrate all three together. Sorry, that was a motorbike. And the Uranus needs a very distinctive and productive outlet, and a lot of that can be through channeling into creative mental ideas, thoughts, reflections, sharing, very specific ideals and aspirations that basically dig deeper into a deeper level of truth, right, within ourselves and within this structure of reality. See, I want to show you, actually, before I do, let me just read a couple of comments of Mars Uranus combination. Rebellion, nonconformity, difficulties with authority, the drive for absolute independence, fighting for freedom, extreme personal eccentricity, sudden physical actions often leading to accidents, often associated with surgery. I've seen over the years people who have Mars Uranus aspects in their chart. Accidents are a very typical theme, like as in car accidents and things like that seem to be very common. Think about Uranus, as I said, as this electric sort of impulse and energy that's outside of the establishment, the status quo, that is just seeking to be totally free, right? Think about Saturn castrating Uranus in mythology, right? Saturn wanting to hold order and control over everything and everybody, right? And Uranus not really wanting a bar of it, right? And being castrated as a result of actually giving wisdom, pouring wisdom into the consciousness of humanity, right? That was why he was punished, basically, because he gave he gave the fire, the water, uh, the he gave the secrets of the gods, as it were, right, to humanity, and the gods, of course, need to be at that higher sort of plane, if you like. And so if they don't have that level of being a deity, a god or a goddess, then who's going to worship them? If humanity is at the same level as them, there's not going to be anyone there to worship them. So that's another theme that comes into it. But Uranus being the energy that corresponds to being free, being liberated, being awake, individuation. It is also, because it corresponds to Aquarius, it connects to freedom and equality, justice and fairness, and things like that. And there doesn't seem to be a lot of justice and fairness going on in the world, still. And there have been and there are still very big movements that would describe that Uranian impulse, which is to bring about a greater sense of equality in the world, right? And we're still sort of fighting for that, aren't we? We've come a long way relative to even 10, 20 years ago, let alone a couple of hundred years ago. But we've still got a lot to work through. So some other comments I made about Uranus being at the apex of this T-square. The tension, T-squares always produce a very specific tension, okay? And the tension is between the two bodies that are opposite each other, and the third one, which is called the apex planet, which is kind of holding this whole vibration. And so Uranus is holding all this energy together from Mars and Saturn, and it needs an outlet, as I said, right? And there's enormous tension that's provoked through this particular planetary aspect pattern. It feels like that the pressure is so intense, and it can evoke an individual to act in very reckless and unpredictable and very extreme ways, right? If this energy is not handled properly, it produces enormous overload of nervous electrical tension, as I was talking about electrical tension and energy. And it needs a mental one of the keys around this is a mental outlet in order to prevent sort of destructive action from manifesting, because it can be that really reckless behavior that one just steps into, that you normally wouldn't, that's really kind of radical and unpredictable and not controlled at all, and it can produce some, obviously some problems. So it needs to have that outlet which is creative, which produces a sense of freedom, and it will be very much corresponding to the mental sort of sphere, right? Remember, Uranus also corresponds to memory, long-term memory, and it also corresponds to trauma, and trauma being activated as well, perhaps. It just depends where this is in your chart and what's going on in your life at the moment. What are you working on, and so forth. If you're an individual who's just being really going through a really frustrating time with the circumstances of your life, and it's kind of like that breaking point. You really need to just release and sort of take a particular path, take some action towards things. This could be like a real sort of pressure point, breaking point type of energy that could release that. So depends on what it is that might or might not be a positive thing, right? Um, okay. It's also the Uranus at the apex here also would speak to the individual feeling like, I'm my own authority, which is what we ultimately all need to integrate, a sense of our own inner authority to actually limit the prospect of continuously projecting Saturn outside of us. But that takes work, awareness, consciousness, integration, and so forth, right? Evolution. And so we're all doing that to our best capability. But Uranus is, it's anti the establishment. It's anti the man-made law. It's not interested in being, incarcerated or judged or, held accountable, as it were, through the consensus reality of Saturn and the laws and norms and rules that correspond to that. So this brings up that energy in a person of, I'm my own authority, I'm a law unto myself. No one can stop me from what I want to do. It can be that as well. At really high levels, though, because it's got quite a magnetic and intuitive frequency to it, it can also be a really powerful force for the deeper search of truths and inspiring the collective, inspiring society. It's the visionaries. It brings about that visionary sort of seeking individual, who's aspiring to free humanity. That's what Uranus was wanting to do, is wanting to kind of free humanity from being asleep, as it were. That's why he poured, the stream of consciousness, wisdom into the collective, right? And just to give an example, so it's the visionary who can create or who seeks to liberate the masses from enslavement or from being asleep, right? It's that kind of signature. Let me just bring up a chart that I think is a wonderful example. Let's just clear all drawings. Okay. Rudolph Steiner. I know many of you have heard of him. This guy was a genius, in my opinion, an incredibly enlightened being and soul. I might actually just do a session on his chart one day. He was a true clairvoyant. Look at that Mercury-Neptune conjunction in Pisces. You really don't see that very often, that signature. Neptune in Pisces, Mercury in Pisces. Anyway, that's another story. What I wanted to show here is that he has a T-square with the Sun opposite Saturn, square Uranus. So he's an individual who holds this signature of a T-square with Uranus being at the apex. And so he was, because of his level of consciousness and awareness and wisdom and everything that he brought through his teachings and his visions and his insight and knowledge and understanding and all of that, which was the Mercury conjunct Neptune in Pisces, Uranus being at the apex point of Sun Saturn, that was him being sort of faced off, if you like, with the establishment, Saturn, right? And Uranus was the frequency that he, so look at Uranus, it's in the 8th house. So his teachings, you could say, are very occult-like and esoteric, right? They are very deep, deep, deep aspects of wisdom, right? It's not general knowledge what he brought about. So his Uranus was highly activating that 8th house, which has the incredible depth and layers that go into the 8th house are beyond what our left brain could ever even contemplate. So Sun Uranus individuals are frequently individuals who will not conform to the establishment. Okay. And so I mean, there's a lot of stories around his death, for instance, as well. It's been said that he was killed. And look at Mars right on his descendant. Well, that's enemies. Mars Pluto, as a matter of fact. So he did have a lot of enemies, and he was sticking it up the establishment. Sun Uranus. That's what Sun Uranus individuals do. And he was constantly interfaced with the consensus reality and just the limitation of the model of reality before us. And so his passion and drive and motivation was to wake people up, to give people wisdom and tools that were accessible, that could help people be more creative, more in touch with their intuition, imagination, heart center. He had a lot of understanding and wisdom in health, in all sorts of ways, spiritually, emotionally, physically, and so forth. So, anyway, here's a really good example of a T square, the Uranus being the one holding the key to this energy. And so, this is what we're looking at with this transit here coming up towards the end of this month. Let me just take it back to that particular alignment, which is around here. So this energy is in play just for a few days, right? And so from what I've discussed, you can see that it's going to vary in terms of manifestation, expression, depending on the individual. And then, of course, it's going to have its collective version as well, right? So it can bring about some really crazy type of events, radical, unpredictable, destabilizing type of events that could bring harm to a certain extent because it is Mars, Saturn, Uranus. But on the other hand, it could also bring certain breakthroughs that we actually need at the moment in the world with everything that's going on. We need some breakthroughs of actual truth. And Uranus is the one that brings about breakthroughs, sudden, unexpected breakthroughs, but it's not going to come without some tension and conflict and opposition, right? As we progress forward, there's going to be a Venus-Mars conjunction, which is just here on the around 12th of July. So that's Mars and Venus in Leo. That's a nice transit, actually. Again, depending on where it's happening in your birth chart, that brings up matters of passion, romance, love, creativity, shining, really expressing your talents and your gifts and being seen. And Venus Venus is that beautiful goddess who's a benefic planet who brings that sense of happiness and shines. She shines upon us her benefic qualities and nature. And so with the Mars Venus, there's incredible passion that goes on as well. So this could be the spark of a particular romance and relationship. If it's not connected to relationships, it would be more about your own creative journey, creative processes, and just things that you are actualizing and working on. And Venus is going to bestow her beautiful gifts and light upon you during that time. So it's a great energy for creative processes and self-expression, actually. And that beautiful heart-centered expression. Leo rules the heart, right? Just one other final aspect before I go. And when does it happen? Let me see. Oh, yeah. So if we just go forward a few more days, around about here. So Mars and Venus are still dancing together, so we could kind of throw them both in this aspect. So what I'm pointing to is, let me just grab a couple of... So what I'm pointing to is Mars specifically, but we can throw in Venus, forms an inconjunct to Pluto, okay, and then forms an inconjunct to Neptune. And so Pluto forms a sextile to Neptune. So that's a Yod, okay? So Yod is made up of two quincunx or inconjunct aspects, and at the base there, the two planets are sextile each other, okay? So this is a configuration that's really only going to be in play for a couple of days' time, but Yods are a very auspicious kind of configuration because they do point to destiny and fate, a twist of fate, a twist of events that could happen, right? So it's got to do with our actions, and if we bring in Venus, it could have to do with love as well and money. So there is something very prominent and very auspicious in the heavens during, 18th, 19th, 20th, 21st of July, those few days there, where a particular relationship takes a different twist of events, or a particular fated relationship can come in at this time, and or very specific creative artistic projects and endeavors that we are engaged in during this time. There could be a really powerful twist of fate during that time as well. And first of all, a Yod speaks to destiny and fate, and we also have Pluto involved in this Yod, and Pluto is the body that speaks to fate and destiny as well, and it's involved in this Yod. And Neptune, of course, speaks to spirit and divine inspiration. And, that can be also very easily connected to spiritual pursuits or spiritual creative pursuits as well, and things of that nature. So it has a very mystical, fated, energized, willful, and gift orientated energy to it, this particular Yod, okay? And this all happens while Mars is in Leo and Venus is in Leo as well, around about that time. So I just wanted to, point that out, because that might just be something very powerful to observe and monitor in your own life during this time. And obviously think about where these planets are transiting in your chart, because that will add another dimension and layer to it. And just finally, Leo, as we've said, corresponds to heart center, heart energy. Mars in esoteric astrology is a planet that would be considered a more of a lower astral planet, non-sacred sort of planet, if you like. And so the gift of Mars in Leo is the Mars in esoteric astrology ultimately is seeking to execute the will of the divine. Mars is a planet that is connected to ray number 6. Ray number 6 corresponds to Mars and Neptune. So Mars in Leo, then, what I'm suggesting is that esoterically, it is a really beautiful signature and vibration for us to act through the heart, the deepest heart center of ourself, with our actions, not only for our own selfish sort of desires, if you like, but for the divine will, because it's the heart center. And it's also about waking up the lower centers, which is Mars. Mars would be the lower centers, waking that up into the heart center, which is love. So to put our creative energy and pursuits um, from the basis of the love center in our heart, Leo, the heart chakra. So you can include that into everything else I've discussed relative to Mars in Leo. Okay. All right. So I think I'm going to. Oh, there was Winston Churchill as well. Let me just. So, where was his yod? Let me see. Okay. So, he's got he had a Uranus Saturn opposition. That's no surprise given the individual that he was and everything that he stood for. And Pluto is actually squaring Uranus and is also squaring Saturn. Now, some people might say that square from Pluto to Saturn is a little bit wide, and I'll leave that up to you to make up your own mind. But I see that as a pretty powerful T square, actually. And Pluto's at the apex zone. It is a little bit different to what we were looking at before with Rudolph Steiner. Let me just see something here. Yeah. So the closer T square, actually, it's just occurred to me by looking at this a little bit further. I didn't really look at this chart before. So it's Uranus forming a square to Mercury, Mercury forming the opposition to Pluto, and Pluto forming the square to Uranus. So basically a T square. So he's got two T squares. Quite interesting. So there it is there. And there's the Saturn. So basically, I mean, this guy's got a grand cross, right? That's what this is. It's called a grand cross. And that's a whole other level. So I'm not going to go into that. But if we just stick to the theme of Uranus being at the apex of a T square, which is the energy that we're going to be working with this month, well, here's another individual who was very Uranian like in his thinking and the way he operated in his life. And Uranus was a very powerful planet in the 11th house for him, squaring Pluto and Mercury at the apex of this T square. And he was a very Uranian type of individual. You know, he was sort of not really working in alignment with the establishment, as it were. He sort of brought about very, visionary type of components into the things that he wrote and spoke about. You know, he wasn't he wasn't really a Saturn sort of figure. He'd be more of a Uranian figure, right? And we can see that Uranus is certainly very close to that Mercury square. It is also very close to the opposition to Uranus. Anyway, okay, we'll leave that. We'll leave that. And I just wanted to point to a couple of people who have Uranus as an apex in a T-square pattern in their charts, and just how much a particular aspect pattern can really describe so much about an individual's journey in their life and who they will become and what they will stand for and what they will be remembered for as well. So yeah, hopefully these comments are useful and you can reflect on that relative to your own birth chart, and share your comments below and questions if you have them. And I recently just put out a post about rectification. I'm doing some extra work at the moment, so I'm offering a bit of a special on rectification for a number of reasons, which if you email me, I'll explain. A lot of people do not have the right time of birth. Even if you have a birth certificate time, it doesn't mean it's the right time of birth. So yeah, email me if you're interested in potentially having your chart rectified. And also if you're interested in my Venus workshops that I've created, there's two that are available as audio files. One's 7.5 hours, one's 3.5 hours. So if you're curious about that, just shoot me an email, and I'll see you guys soon with something else, no doubt. And I'm also in the process of beginning to create the next workshop. Okay, so I'll see you guys soon. Much love. Thanks for watching. Bye.